Tonight we're delving into the extraordinarily intricate existences of some of medieval history's most famously inbred noblewomen. These figures, often born from unions of close relatives and married into even closer ones, were pivotal in the royal custom of safeguarding power and bloodlines within the family circle. Before we embark, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing if you genuinely appreciate the content I share. Also, feel free to drop a comment indicating your viewing location and current time. It's always fascinating to connect with our global audience. Now, dim the ambient lights, perhaps let a gentle fan hum in the background, and let's commence our shared journey this evening. Joanna of Castile, born in 1479, was the third offspring of two immensely influential and remarkably consanguineous individuals. Her parents were Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the very monarchs who championed Columbus's voyages, orchestrated the expulsion of the Moors, and somehow still deemed cousin marriages a wise strategic maneuver. Joanna was a scion of the Spanish Trastamara dynasty, a lineage already well-versed in intermarriage. By the time of her birth, the royal gene pool had been adequately blended to sustain viability, yet not sufficiently to preclude challenges such as emotional volatility, persistent melancholia, and a rather pronounced jawline. In her adolescent years, Joanna was dispatched to Flanders to wed Philip the Handsome. Despite his epithet, he presented more as a genetically optimized Habsburg than genuinely attractive, and, quite predictably, he was her cousin. The Habsburgs, after all, possessed a distinct flair for two pursuits: accumulating crowns and disregarding genetic cautions. Initially, prospects appeared promising. Joanna was sharp, captivating, and reportedly deeply enamored with Philip. Regrettably, Philip's affections leaned less towards her and more towards virtually every other woman. Joanna's fervent disposition and intense possessiveness were ill-received in a court accustomed to cold alliances and casual philandering. When Philip met his sudden demise, possibly from typhoid or perhaps a touch of karmic consequence, Joanna's anguish was profound. She adamantly refused to part with his remains. His sarcophagus accompanied her on her journeys across Spain, with Joanna occasionally unsealing it to ascertain his state. Perhaps romantically poignant in a medieval context, yet also quite possibly unhinged. Her numerous political adversaries swiftly capitalized on this conduct. Her father, Ferdinand, cited it as conclusive evidence of her unfitness to rule. Her son Charles, who would later ascend as Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, echoed this sentiment. Conveniently, both men subsequently governed in her stead, while she remained confined within a convent for the majority of her existence. Was Joanna genuinely mentally unstable? Historians continue to deliberate this point. Some propose she suffered from a mental affliction exacerbated by sorrow and incarceration. Others posit she was simply politically inconvenient in an era where an expressive woman, particularly one aware of her husband's infidelities, was practically deemed traitorous. Regardless, Joanna was more than merely a pitiable figure. She embodied a confluence of royal pressures, dynastic inbreeding, and some of history's most regrettable coping mechanisms. If an accolade existed for the most foreseen genetic outcome, Maria Anna of Spain would undoubtedly be clutching the trophy, with her offspring likely drooling upon it. Born in 1634, Maria Anna was the progeny of King Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria, themselves cousins in that uniquely fervent Habsburg manner. Thus, naturally, Maria Anna espoused her uncle. Indeed, her actual uncle, Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor. Because when your lineage is essentially a self-perpetuating loop driven by ambition, why not intensify the pattern? Maria Anna was discerning and pious, fluent in several languages, politically shrewd, and seemingly benevolent. She conferred decorum upon the imperial court, alongside the genetic equivalent of repeatedly duplicating a photocopy. Her most notable historical contribution was giving birth to Charles II of Spain, arguably the most consanguineous monarch to ever occupy a throne without collapsing. Charles inherited not merely the crown, but the entirety of the Habsburg genetic legacy. A pronounced jaw, a receding chin, chronic ailments, sterility, and suspected cognitive delays. He struggled with fundamental functions such as eating and articulation, which, to be fair, is relatable before coffee, but less so when you are governing a global dominion. Was any of this Maria Anna's culpability? Certainly not. She did not invent Habsburg marital arrangements, but she certainly partook in the enduring family tradition of transforming political alliances into genetic high-wire acts. To her credit, she deeply cherished her son and was fiercely protective of him throughout his fragile existence. She served as regent during his minority and endeavored to shield him from court manipulation, an undertaking akin to halting a food fight in a chamber full of ravenous toddlers wielding daggers. Maria Anna passed away in 1696, a year after her son. The Spanish Empire, which she helped guide into decline, soon dissolved into the War of Spanish Succession, a conflict partially instigated because Charles II could not produce an heir, because, predictably, he could not. If you've ever pondered what transpires when a family approaches matrimony like a spreadsheet formula, Isabella of Habsburg offers a lucid illustration. Born in 1501, Isabella was the daughter of Philip the Handsome, yes, him again, and Joanna of Castile, also known as Joanna the Mad, though Joanna the Understandably Burdened might be a more fitting description by this juncture. This made Isabella the sister of Emperor Charles V and the niece of half of continental Europe. Her genetic blueprint was less a mystery and more a royal recipe reiterated excessively. A Habsburg foundation, a hint of Trastamara, and an absolute absence of novel constituents. At 17, Isabella exchanged vows with Christian II of Denmark, a monarch renowned for reformative endeavors, erratic conduct, and the general bearing of a man one dissatisfying breakfast away from declaring hostilities upon his furnishings. Their union was predictably both strategic and profoundly awkward. Isabella and Christian were cousins, naturally, but what truly cemented the genetic circumstance was that her Habsburg lineage already replicated like a medieval screensaver. She was expected to furnish stability, allure, and political advantage, and perhaps also to divert attention from the fact that her family tree increasingly resembled a decorative wreath. Life within the Danish court proved unkind to Isabella. Christian's rule faltered. He was deposed, incarcerated, and at one juncture, exiled. Isabella followed him with unyielding fidelity, a demonstration of either genuine devotion or inherited tenacity. Her health deteriorated during years of court drama and political banishment, and she succumbed at the tender age of 24. Some surmise complications linked to childbirth or illness exacerbated by stress and royal machinations. Their progeny, naturally, perpetuated the noble custom of inbreeding. One of them, Dorothea, married Frederick II, Elector Palatine, a quintessential Habsburg match, because if anything transcended jawlines and titles in the dynasty's esteem, It was ensuring no family gathering ever necessitated name tags. Eleanor of Austria was born in 1498, already at a disadvantage, being positioned between the dawn of the Renaissance and a myriad of regal expectations. She was the offspring of Philip the Handsome and Joanna of Castile, designating her as the elder sister of Charles V and a proud possessor of what can only be termed deluxe Habsburg genetics. Her formative years were spent in a diplomatic antechamber. Her teenage years comprised a series of near marriages. At one point, she was pledged to Henry VIII of England, but that arrangement dissolved, a stroke of fortune for her. Evading that particular union was one of the rare instances where Habsburg inbreeding may have inadvertently enhanced an individual's quality of life. Instead, Eleanor's initial marriage was to Manuel I of Portugal, who was not only considerably older but also her first cousin once removed. In the sphere of royal matrimony, this constituted essentially the medieval equivalent of marrying a neighbor. She assumed the title of Queen of Portugal, bore 2 children, and was widowed before reaching her 3rd decade. So, naturally, the resolution was to marry her off again, this time to Francis I of France, a man who had previously been held captive by her brother Charles V. Ah, the romance of the era. Francis held no particular fondness for Eleanor, perceiving her less as a spouse and more as a political overture with a Habsburg return address. Their marriage was barren and emotionally distant. He devoted more time to his paramours than to his queen, while Eleanor primarily occupied herself with reading, prayer, and politely feigning ignorance. Despite being wedded to the King of France, Eleanor remained steadfastly loyal to her Habsburg heritage, and one can hardly fault her. They may have been inbred, but they were dependably consistent. Eleanor outlived both her husbands and quietly receded into political obscurity, passing away in 1558. She was celebrated for her piety, composure, and the remarkable capacity to endure 2 royal marriages without instigating a scandal, an Olympic-level achievement within her lineage. Her life served as a masterclass in quiet resilience. Although she did not spark conflicts or controversies, she epitomized the Habsburg woman's role: wed the cousin, produce the successor, and maintain a polite unawareness that the family resemblance was intensifying with each passing generation. Catherine of Aragon was born in 1485 to Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, Spain's formidable couple and occasional genealogical bottleneck. As a princess of 2 unified realms, Catherine possessed everything: affluence, education, titles, and a family tree that looped more tightly than a medieval folk tune. By the age of 3, Catherine was already betrothed to Arthur, Prince of Wales, eldest son of Henry VII. The rationale? Europe's royal families maintained a charming custom of uniting their cousins with other cousins, ideally with complementary heraldic devices. Catherine and Arthur were second cousins through John of Gaunt, which, in noble terms, approached a state of unrelatedness. They married in 1501, and Arthur promptly expired 5 months later. Did the marriage involve consummation? That query would come to define English history, ignite the Reformation, and perplex legal minds for centuries. Meanwhile, Catherine was ensnared in diplomatic purgatory. An adolescent widow residing in England, husbandless, her dowry unrecovered, and still very much a chess piece in the game of royal alliances. Enter Henry VIII, Arthur's younger brother and ultimately her second spouse. It's not every day one weds 2 sons from the same lineage, but then again, the Trastamaras were keen on recycling names, titles, and, apparently, consorts. Their initial years together were genuinely affectionate. Catherine was intelligent, graceful, and politically astute. She bestowed upon Henry prestige, an alliance with Spain, and 5 pregnancies, only one of which yielded a surviving child. Mary, later known as Mary I, lamentably, Henry yearned for a male heir, and Catherine, after years of miscarriages and heartbreak, could not provide one. That's when matters escalated from awkward to catastrophic. Henry asserted their marriage was invalid because Catherine had previously been wedded to his brother. Catherine, bolstered by the Pope, insisted upon its legitimacy. Thus commenced the world's most dramatic annulment petition, featuring theological polemics, political threats, and one exceptionally determined monarch establishing his own church simply to escape the union. Catherine was banished, stripped of her title, and compelled to live out her remaining days in isolation, affirming until the end that she was Henry's rightful wife. Her royal blood may have been azure, but it was also remarkably concentrated. Her marriage significantly shaped English history, not through conflict or diplomacy, but by serving as a stark admonition that intermarriage rarely concludes quietly. Margaret of Austria was born in 1480, the sole daughter of Emperor Maximilian of Austria and Mary of Burgundy. She was a Habsburg from birth, signifying her family tree was essentially a circle sketched by an ambitious toddler wielding a crown. From the outset, Margaret's life revolved around strategic arrangements. At the age of 3, she was engaged to Charles VIII of France. At 12, she was returned like an ill-fitting wedding present when Charles opted to marry someone else, and of Brittany, who offered superior geographical advantages. Margaret, mortified but composed, reportedly declared, "I shall have my vengeance." And to her credit, she later succeeded in governing half of Europe, a fair outcome indeed. Her second engagement was to Juan of Castile, son of Ferdinand and Isabella, and yes, her cousin. Naturally, the match was intended to solidify Habsburg-Spanish relations and keep the gene pool as confined as possible. Juan passed away shortly after their marriage, and Margaret, still under 20, was now twice rejected by royal husbands, once by choice, once by fate. She was presented with other suitors, including one of Henry VIII's sons, but Margaret declined. She had officially retired from the royal marriage lottery, dedicating her life instead to statesmanship, art, and outliving her relatives, no small accomplishment. Appointed governor of the Netherlands by her nephew Charles V, Margaret managed the region with intellect, diplomacy, and sheer Habsburg resolve. She negotiated treaties, balanced volatile provinces, and was one of the few women in Europe genuinely entrusted with authority, possibly because her surname was Habsburg and also because she wasn't preoccupied with bearing her uncle's cousin's heir. Despite the ceaseless dynastic drama surrounding her, Margaret lived a relatively scandal-free life. She amassed art, supported music, and even attempted to impart some rudimentary governing skills to young Charles. A thankless endeavor considering he was emperor by 19 and related to nearly everyone on the planet. Margaret passed away in 1530 after a relatively minor foot injury proved fatal, because medieval medicine was essentially an elaborate means of stating, "You'll likely perish from that." She remains one of the few Habsburg women remembered more for her policies than her lineage, though the lineage, naturally, was still profoundly inbred. Blanche of Castile was born in 1188, a period when nobles still perceived marrying one's cousin as a strategic advantage rather than a biological hazard. As the granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II of England, and the daughter of King Alfonso VIII of Castile and Eleanor of England, Blanche entered the world with more royal lineage than red blood cells. By the time she could walk, her family was already orchestrating which relative she would marry. The fortunate recipient, Louis VIII of France, her cousin. Not merely a third cousin twice removed at Christmas, but more akin to, we share grandparents, should we still proceed. But of course, this was medieval royalty, where if your intended did not share a branch of your family tree, it was considered poor diplomacy. At the age of 12, Blanche sailed to France to wed Louis, whose father King Philip II reportedly remarked, "She is petite, but she will grow graceful." They exchanged vows in 1200, initiating Blanche into a life of dynastic chess, religious fervor, and politely overlooking the fact that most of her husband's forebears were also her own. Blanche was more than a mere ceremonial figure. When Louis ascended to kingship, she became queen consort, and after his demise, she assumed true power behind the throne as regent for her young son, Louis IX, later Saint Louis. She governed France with the acumen of a woman who comprehended precisely how unstable her extended family could be. She organized crusades, quelled insurrections, and managed to preserve the kingdom intact, all while navigating barons who harbored doubts about her because she was both a woman and marginally more Castilian than they preferred. She responded with diplomacy, force, and occasionally, house arrest. Genetically, Blanche represented centuries of consolidation. English, Castilian, French, all interwoven into one resolute young queen. If DNA possessed a warning indicator, hers would have been flashing incessantly. She was devout, fiercely protective of her offspring, and absolutely not to be underestimated. Louis IX later attained sainthood, but Blanche was the one who ensured he survived long enough to earn the title. Anne of Bohemia and Hungary was born in 1503, which in Habsburg terms implied she was born with half a crown and half a family gathering in her veins. Her parents were Vladislaus II of Hungary and Bohemia and Anne of Foy-Candale. And while that's second and might sound like a breath of genetic novelty, do not be deceived. This was still very much an arranged entanglement of recurring royal relations, and matured knowing she would eventually be married off like a particularly valuable diplomatic brief. And indeed, in 1521, at the venerable age of 18, she was united with her double first cousin, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, who would subsequently become Ferdinand I, Holy Roman Emperor. That's correct, double first cousin, meaning they shared both sets of grandparents, essentially a mirror match. In contemporary terms, marrying one's double first cousin would elicit considerable scrutiny. In the Habsburg milieu, it bolstered dynastic stability and potentially the incidence of congenital anomalies. Priorities. Indeed, despite the genetic hazards, the marriage conferred political advantages. It united the Habsburgs with the crowns of Hungary and Bohemia. It also yielded 15 children. Yes, 15, because if one intends to consolidate royal bloodlines, why not do so comprehensively? And herself was characterized as pious, benevolent, and dutiful, which is another way of saying she did not voice discontent while serving as the adhesive in a massive European political jigsaw puzzle. She accompanied Ferdinand on his various imperial campaigns and held court in multiple locales depending on which part of Europe required a reminder that the Habsburgs remained in command and were still very much partial to family weddings. Regrettably, and passed away young in 1547, likely exhausted from a lifetime of childbirth, statesmanship, and feigning unawareness that her family was aggressively enamored with itself. She did not live to witness Ferdinand crowned Holy Roman Emperor, but through her, the Habsburgs had successfully annexed Central Europe as if it were on a clearance sale. And of Bohemia and Hungary's life was a case study in elite consanguinity. A woman born into a dynasty that prioritized borders over biology, stability over sanity, and somehow still managed to produce half the emperors in Europe. Joanna of Naples, also known as Joanna I, reigned from the mid-14th century, a period when marrying one's cousin was not merely fashionable, but practically a survival tactic for the aristocracy. Born in 1326 to Charles, Duke of Calabria, and Maria of Valois, Joanna entered the world already triply legitimate with royal lineage and at least 2 layers of cousin marriage residue. Her family tree was a Mediterranean labyrinth. On one side, the French House of Valois, on the other, the Angevins of Naples. Her uncles were kings, her cousins were kings, and her marital prospects were inevitably also kings and cousins. Joanna's first husband was Andrew of Hungary, her cousin, naturally. The marriage was an awkward political pairing orchestrated by the Pope, which rarely culminates in a felicitous union. Andrew was reportedly boorish, unpopular, and about as welcome in Naples as Contagion. Joanna was displeased, the Neapolitan nobles were displeased, and soon after Andrew was crowned co-ruler, he was assassinated, likely strangled with a curtain cord, probably with Joanna's cognizance, if not approbation. Let's term it a mutual incompatibility. She proceeded to marry 3 more times, to Louis of Taranto, her cousin, James IV of Majorca, also a cousin, and Otto of Brunswick-Grubenhagen, a minor noble with surprisingly little blood relation. Scandalous. If marrying within one's own family were an Olympic event, Joanna would have garnered 4 medals. Politically, Joanna was a formidable force. She ruled Naples in her own right, challenged the papacy, and championed reforms in a profoundly corrupt kingdom. She was even excommunicated at one point for endorsing the wrong pope during the Western Schism. One knows they are excelling in medieval politics when both their relatives and the Vatican desire their demise. She was eventually overthrown by Charles of Durazzo, yet another relative, who invaded Naples, imprisoned her, and had her suffocated to death with a pillow, which, given her history with husbands and family, might have seemed oddly familiar. Joanna of Naples governed boldly in a male-dominated world, married her way through multiple family branches, and died in the embrace of someone who likely shared her great-grandmother. Born in 1566, Isabella Clara Eugenia was the offspring of Philip II of Spain and Elizabeth of Valois, a union between close cousins because by this juncture the Habsburgs were less a family and more a controlled genetic experiment with a royal budget. From the moment she could wield a quill, Isabella was being groomed to rule, which in Habsburg terms meant mastering diplomacy, religious doctrine, and how to politely disregard that half her uncles were also technically her cousins. Her father, Philip II, was incredibly fond of her. This may have been because she was intelligent and composed, or simply because she did not attempt to rebel or marry outside the family. She was considered a strong contender to inherit the entire Spanish Empire, but the inconvenient issue of male preference meant that her future would hinge on marriage, naturally to another Habsburg. She was eventually married to Archduke Albert of Austria, who was also her cousin, if that surprises you. Welcome to your inaugural lesson on European royalty. Together, they were appointed co-sovereigns of the Spanish Netherlands, a charming euphemism for governing a politically volatile region and contending with incessant revolts while reporting to Madrid. Despite the challenge, Isabella rose to the occasion. She ruled with intelligence, religious fervor, and the serene focus of someone who had memorized every papal encyclical ever written and still found time to micromanage her courtiers. Her marriage to Albert was reportedly blissful, or at least harmonious, possibly because they shared sufficient DNA to communicate telepathically. When he passed away in 1621, Isabella continued to govern solo as regent on behalf of the Spanish crown. She took religious vows and adopted the attire of a nun, which did not impede her in the slightest. She oversaw peace treaties, maintained semi-loyal provinces, and even kept a functional postal service. Yes, the Habsburgs entrusted her with managing warfare, rebellion, and logistics. That's practically deserving of canonization. Isabella passed away in 1633, leaving behind a reputation as one of the most capable rulers of her era. Her reign was a rare instance where Habsburg inbreeding produced not merely agitated chins and erratic monarchs, but actual competence. Mary of Burgundy was born in 1457, the sole progeny of Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, and Isabella of Bourbon. Her inheritance encompassed a vast expanse of European territory, a family lineage that prided itself on noble unions with familiar surnames, and the expectation that she would marry another noble with equally recirculated DNA. Her father, Charles the Bold, met his end in battle when Mary was merely 19. Leaving her abruptly in charge of Europe's wealthiest and most politically unstable duchy. Everyone coveted a portion of Burgundy. The French, the Habsburgs, the neighbors, the cousins, especially the cousins. To stabilize affairs, Mary married Maximilian of Austria, future Holy Roman Emperor, and naturally, her second cousin once removed. A sound match by Habsburg metrics, where the available partners were essentially just the family circulating within itself. The marriage proved politically astute. Maximilian gained access to the Burgundian territories, and Mary acquired an energetic husband proficient in wielding a sword and endorsing a treaty, often within the same afternoon. Despite being a power alliance, it was also reportedly affectionate, which is downright scandalous by arranged marriage standards. But her rule was brief and tumultuous. She was incessantly pressured by French ambitions, rebellious Flemish cities, and courtiers who believed a woman should not be permitted to govern unless she was also engaged in needlework. Mary resisted, signing the great privilege to grant more rights to her subjects, asserting her authority alongside her husband, and generally performing the medieval equivalent of managing a vast corporation with an infant on one hip. Then, in 1482, calamity struck. While hunting, because aristocrats frequently indulged in courting fatal injuries for sport, Mary suffered a fall from her horse, fractured her spine, and passed away at just 25. It was sudden, tragic, and the sort of conclusion that left Maximilian in mourning and Europe scrambling to claim custody of their children. Her demise marked a turning point. Burgundy, once an autonomous powerhouse, was absorbed into the Habsburg Empire through her son, Philip the Handsome. Yes, that Philip, the one who married Joanna the Mad and bequeathed his jawline to half of Europe. Maria Theresa of Austria was born in 1717, the sole surviving offspring of Emperor Charles VI. Her birth was met with a royal shrug since she was not a son. But Charles, ever the optimist, or perhaps simply oblivious to European politics, issued the Pragmatic Sanction, a grand imperial document that essentially declared, yes, I acknowledge she's a woman, but she still inherits the empire. Okay, spoiler alert, Europe was not amenable to that. When Charles VI passed away in 1740, Maria Theresa inherited the vast Habsburg dominions and a diplomatic quagmire. Nearly every European power challenged her right to rule. The reason? Because she had the audacity to be a woman with a crown who had not yet married a first cousin. Actually, scratch that, she had. Maria Theresa married Francis Stephen of Lorraine, who was technically her distant cousin, because of course. Their union yielded 16 children, including future emperors, queens, and Marie Antoinette. Yes, the let-them-eat-cake individual. With such prodigious progeny, Maria Theresa did not merely transmit the crown, she transmitted all the chromosomes. But make no mistake, this was no sheltered monarch concealed behind velvet drapes. Maria Theresa was one of the most efficacious rulers of her era. She reformed the military, restructured taxation, centralized bureaucracy, and modernized education, all while pregnant approximately every other year. It's the kind of multitasking that makes even contemporary supermoms appear like part-timers. And yet, she was still a Habsburg, which entailed a healthy degree of meticulous oversight, strict Catholicism, and an instinctive preference for marrying her children into the same select group of families repeatedly. The consequence, an even more intricately woven tapestry of Habsburg cousins, now dispersed across all of Europe like an aggressively cultivated royal ivy. She governed until her passing in 1780, having outlived her husband, survived multiple conflicts, and ensured that the Habsburg name remained prominently displayed across the continent for another generation or 5. Her son, Joseph II, Holy Roman Emperor, inherited the empire, and her genetic legacy continued marching resolutely into the Enlightenment. Yolanda of Aragon was born in 1384, royalty from infancy to grave. The daughter of King John I of Aragon and Violent of Bar, she possessed more noble surnames than most individuals had teeth, and naturally her family tree was less arbor and more a recurrent root system where half her relatives also served as potential in-laws. Yolanda's upbringing was as regal as one could conceive. She was intelligent, politically astute, and by medieval standards, perilously opinionated. This rendered her both a valuable dynastic prize and a nightmare for anyone expecting a docile queen. Her marriage, Louis II of Anjou, a French prince, and yes, her cousin, because nothing encapsulates genuine affection like mutually shared great-grandparents. As Duchess of Anjou and Queen Consort of Naples, though primarily in title, Yolanda was never content to remain inactive and embellish coats of arms. She was the clandestine architect of alliances, the financier of armies, and a fascinating detail, one of the few royals who actually managed to support Joan of Arc and endure the subsequent political fallout. While her husband gallivanted about asserting claims to thrones he could not truly secure, Yolanda managed affairs. She mustered armies, negotiated treaties, administered estates, and acted as the true power in Anjou. Her children were married off to other royals, again often cousins, and she personally ensured they were equipped with both political advantages and just enough Habsburg DNA to be deemed legitimate. Her son René of Anjou became known as the Good, possibly because he inherited his mother's intellect and only a fraction of her family's chromosomes. Her daughter Marie married Charles VII of France, granting Yolanda influence over the French throne and, more significantly, the capacity to manipulate Joan of Arc's military campaigns without ever drawing a sword. Yolanda was not merely another name interwoven into a royal tapestry. She was one of the rare medieval women who wielded power without officially holding a throne. Behind every weak king and ambitious general stood a Yolanda, occasionally rolling her eyes and rectifying the map. She passed away in 1442, having outlived enemies, husbands, and the darkest chapters of the 100 Years' War. She was inbred, yes, but also incisive, calculating, and every bit as influential as the kings she quietly outmaneuvered. Margaret of York was born in 1446 to Richard Plantagenet, Duke of York, and Cecily Neville, two individuals so noble they could barely enter a room without tripping over their own heraldry. As the sister of Edward IV, Richard III, and approximately half the War of the Roses, Margaret's DNA was already predisposed to intrigue, resolute decisions, and close proximity courtships. So naturally, she married Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, a man known for his ambition, terrifying military fixation, and crucially, for being yet another cousin in the pan-European genetic loop. Their union in 1468 was less about romance and more about disconcerting France. Margaret brought English prestige, and Charles brought, well, a remarkably pointed beard and relentless obstinacy. Despite the political matchmaking, their marriage was reportedly respectful and even, dare we say, functional. Margaret adapted surprisingly well to the Burgundian court, which was less dusty medieval and more pre-Renaissance trendsetter, replete with silks, tapestries, miniature canine companions, and a dangerous obsession with embroidery. Her intelligence and diplomatic skills quickly earned her the epithet the Grand Lady of the Netherlands. She hosted dignitaries, managed court finances, and even handled correspondence when Charles was engaged in his characteristic pursuits, usually instigating conflicts he couldn't conclude. After he met his end, predictably in battle, Margaret did not pack away her gowns and retire. Instead, she intensified her involvement. She became regent and protector of her stepdaughter, Mary of Burgundy, and advisor to her stepson-in-law, Maximilian of Austria. And yes, that's the Maximilian who married Mary and extended the Habsburg name into even more European branches like a particularly self-satisfied contagion. Margaret did not bear children of her own, but her influence on dynastic politics was undeniable. She helped nurture Philip the Handsome, the individual who married Joanna the Mad and ultimately bestowed upon the world Charles V. So if you're curious where that dynasty's penchant for self-important, chin-heavy ambition originated, Margaret played a role in cultivating it. She passed away in 1503, outliving her brothers, most of her adversaries, and the fading golden age of Burgundy. She may not have added another strand to the inbred family knot, but rest assured, she tied it tighter with impeccable decorum and just enough royal smugness to ensure its longevity. Catherine de' Medici was born in 1519 into the formidable but somewhat controversy-prone Medici family of Florence. Technically not born of consanguineous unions by Habsburg standards, meaning she had at least a few non-cousins in her lineage, Catherine soon compensated for any missed dynastic entanglement by marrying into the French royal family and producing a small army of genetically familiar monarchs. Her husband was Henry II of France, not her blood cousin, but certainly a close match politically. Their marriage was strategic. Italy meets France, finance meets military might, and Medici ambition meets Bourbon drama. Catherine, for her part, adapted swiftly. She arrived in France with no real influence, a suspicious accent, and an awkward third wheel named Diane de Poitiers, her husband's very public mistress. Undeterred, Catherine spent a decade quietly forging alliances, mastering court intrigue, and accumulating children, 10 to be exact. And yes, most of them would go on to marry cousins, because while Catherine wasn't born a Habsburg, she certainly learned to parent like one. When Henry met his demise from a jousting accident, because nothing screams fragile masculinity like taking a splinter to the eye for sport, Catherine became Queen Mother and suddenly the most powerful woman in France. Her sons Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III all took turns wearing the crown, and Catherine took turns governing behind each of them. She was deeply Catholic but politically flexible, which in 16th century France meant occasionally funding Protestant weddings and occasionally orchestrating the mass murder of Protestants at said weddings. Cough, St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, cough. Her renown took a considerable blow after that particular episode. Even for a woman celebrated for orchestrating the marriages of her daughters into 3 prominent European royal lines, this was perceived as exceeding all bounds. Catherine found herself the target of blame for almost everything: the religious conflicts, the court's opulent excesses, and the alarmingly frequent poisonings at state banquets. Yet, she was simultaneously a devoted patron of the arts, a masterful strategist, and somehow managed to keep the faltering Valois dynasty from collapsing amid ceaseless wars, defiant nobles, and family gatherings that likely necessitated food tasters and copious amounts of wine. She passed in 1589, politically depleted but meticulously crafting her legacy. A succession of royals who shared a striking familial resemblance and governed with a peculiar blend of charm, Catholic guilt, and an unusual fondness for familial embraces. In ancient Greece, the act of slumber transcended mere physical recuperation. It was a hallowed ritual, a direct channel to the divine. This profound connection found its most tangible manifestation in the Asclepiad, sacred temples dedicated to dreams and the healing deity Asclepius. These establishments were far from simple lodgings or rustic sanctuaries. They were sprawling spiritual complexes where the infirm, the weary, and the hopeful converged, seeking not just medical attention, but a profound metamorphosis. Preparing for nocturnal repose within these sacred precincts involved more than simply lying down. Firstly, ritual purification was paramount. Pilgrims underwent days of fasting, cleansed themselves in consecrated springs, offered animal sacrifices, and frequently abstained from sexual activity or even specific thoughts. The ultimate objective was to cleanse both corporeal form and spirit before attempting incubation, a spiritual sleep designed to induce curative visions. Within the abbaton, a sequestered, dimly lit chamber, supplicants would finally recline on stone slabs or animal hides. Torches cast dancing shadows upon the walls as priests murmured invocations and burned fragrant incense. Here, sleep became a deliberate voyage into an alternate dimension. Dreams were not considered arbitrary or devoid of meaning. They were believed to be direct communiques from Asclepius himself, offering either symbolic or remarkably explicit guidance for recovery. Dreaming of serpents gliding across one's form, surprisingly, was an auspicious sign. Serpents were sacrosanct to Asclepius, embodying renewal and celestial intervention. In fact, non-venomous snakes were often allowed to freely wander the temple grounds, especially within the sleeping quarters. Indeed, individuals willingly slept surrounded by these reptiles, deeming it a divine privilege. Come morning, the temple priests, many of whom served more as interpreters of visions than medical practitioners, aided in deciphering these nocturnal revelations. Occasionally, they prescribed herbal remedies or dietary adjustments. At other times, the dream itself was deemed the remedy, believed to have restored the soul or spirit to its rightful alignment. The Greek dream temples vividly illustrate that for ancient civilizations, sleep was not merely a biological imperative. It was a mystical expedition, a profound dialogue with the deities, and, if fortune smiled, that whispered divine message in the stillness of the night could not only mend the body but also reshape one's destiny. In ancient Egypt, the state of sleep was more than a mere cessation of wakefulness. It was a symbolic passage into the realm of the departed, a period when the soul, or Ba, embarked on a journey through spiritual dimensions. To guide this nocturnal voyage and shield the dreamer from malevolent forces, Egyptians developed intricate sleep rituals that seamlessly blended mysticism with healing practices, deeply rooted in their expansive cosmic worldview. Prior to retiring, many Egyptians, particularly those of affluence or priestly standing, adhered to complex nocturnal routines. Incense held a pivotal role. Frankincense and myrrh were not simply exotic fragrances, they were sacred instruments. The burning of these resins was believed to purify the surrounding air of demonic influences, invoke divine favor, and soothe the mind. The ascending smoke itself symbolized prayers rising to the heavens, enveloping the sleeper in a protective aura of divine guardianship. Next came the recitation of chants or prayers, often spoken aloud by priests or quietly whispered by individuals. These incantations were more than just comforting lullabies. They functioned as active spiritual defenses, calling upon deities such as Thoth, the god of profound wisdom and dreams, or Biz, a sturdy, lion-faced dwarf god believed to ward off nightmares and malevolent spirits. Depictions of Biz were frequently carved into headboards or painted onto bedroom walls. His fearsome features were intended to intimidate any lurking entities in the shadows. The sleeping chamber itself was prepared as a consecrated space. Beds were frequently elevated and fashioned from woven reeds or wood, with some even incorporating embedded amulets or protective symbols. Distinctive headrests, which would appear remarkably uncomfortable by modern standards, were believed to maintain the soul's harmonious alignment with the celestial bodies during sleep. For Egyptians, directional orientation was crucial. Many aligned their sleeping posture with the rising sun or specific constellations like Orion, which held profound connections to Osiris and the afterlife. Should one experience unsettling dreams or seek divine insight, they might visit a temple, particularly those dedicated to Serapis or Imhotep, where dream incubation rituals akin to those in Greece were performed. Here too, sleep was invited through chants, sacred oils, and purifying incense, always with the profound intention of receiving guidance from beyond the earthly veil. For ancient Egyptians, the act of preparing for bed was not merely about seeking comfort. It was an intricate, ritualistic choreography meticulously designed to bring body, soul, and cosmos into profound harmony. Sleep was deemed perilous, sacred, and brimming with boundless potential. In ancient Babylon, the demarcation between a dream and one's fated path was remarkably subtle. Sleep was far from a mere passive state. It was a realm teeming with omens, spirits, and divine messages. Babylonians regarded their nocturnal visions with such solemnity that entire specialized professions emerged around them. Dream priests, known as Shilu, were highly skilled interpreters of the nocturnal imagery that appeared to both monarchs and common citizens. Before succumbing to slumber, Babylonians frequently performed protective ceremonies to ensure they received only propitious dreams. It was believed that dreams could emanate from benevolent deities like Marduk or Ishtar, but also from malevolent demons or restless wandering spirits. To repel sinister forces, individuals wore talismans, placed protective clay tablets beneath their sleeping platforms, and inscribed mystical symbols around their sleeping quarters, essentially a form of astral security system. Incense crafted from juniper, cedarwood, and tamarisk was kindled at dusk, permeating the dwelling with sacred smoke. This was not merely to perfume the air. It was thought to purify the environment and appease the gods. To the Babylonians, sleep was more than simple repose. It was a portal for celestial communication, and the deities, they believed, favored a pristine entrance. Many Babylonians uttered nighttime prayers or incantations to encourage prophetic dreams. These invocations sought clarity, protection from misleading visions, and secure passage through the dream world. If an individual desired divine guidance on a crucial decision, whether to embark on a military campaign, cultivate a specific crop, or enter into matrimony, they might choose to sleep within a temple or beneath the open expanse of the night sky, a practice referred to as dream incubation. The fervent hope was that the gods would dispatch a dream so vivid and unmistakable that it would unequivocally direct the dreamer's actions by dawn. And when these visions manifested, they were painstakingly recorded on clay tablets, sometimes accompanied by detailed sketches of their content. Over countless generations, Babylonians meticulously compiled extensive dream dictionaries, vast compendiums of symbols and their intricate interpretations. A dream featuring a lion might herald victory in battle. A dream of succumbing to drowning, impending treachery. These volumes exerted such profound influence that their systematic structure later shaped Greek and Roman methods of dream analysis. For the Babylonians, dreams were not mere fleeting psychological phenomena. They were profound communiques from the celestial realm, and each night presented an unparalleled opportunity to discern the divine intentions, provided the appropriate rituals were observed and celestial favor was secured. In the ancient Vedic world of early India, sleep transcended a fundamental biological necessity. It was an event of cosmic significance. The Vedic texts, compiled thousands of years ago, described sleep as a hallowed state where the Atman, or essential soul, temporarily reunited with the universal spirit, Brahman, before its reawakening at daybreak. And like any sacred rite, the transition into sleep demanded meticulous preparation, stringent discipline, and profound awareness. One of the most pivotal aspects of ancient Indian sleep culture revolved around breath regulation, known as pranayama. Practitioners were instructed to tranquilize their minds and decelerate their breathing before retiring, not solely to achieve rapid slumber, but to harmonize their breath with the fundamental rhythms of the cosmos. This was not considered trivial spirituality. It was deemed indispensable for the soul's serene journey during the nocturnal hours. Vedic sages believed that fragmented sleep could lead to mental disorientation, spiritual imbalance, or even adverse karma. Hence, these rituals were diligently adhered to. Many individuals recited evening mantras, sacred Sanskrit hymns that lauded the deities or invoked protection during their period of slumber. A commonly recited nighttime chant was the Gayatri mantra, often whispered while facing the descending sun. The immediate sleeping environment itself carried profound meaning. It was considered inauspicious to sleep with one's head oriented towards the north, as that direction was associated with the domain of death. The south was similarly avoided. The favored orientation was east, symbolizing the acquisition of knowledge, or west, representing peaceful repose. People utilized natural bedding fashioned from kusha grass, cotton, or animal hides, believing certain materials could subtly influence the soul's nocturnal visions. Sacred oils and potent herbs also played an integral role in preparing for slumber. Ancient Ayurvedic texts meticulously detail the practice of warm sesame oil massages before bed, a therapeutic tradition known as abhyanga. This practice served to calm the nervous system, alleviate muscular tension, and prime the mind for a more profound and restorative rest. Herbal infusions concocted from ashwagandha, brahmi, or tulsi were either consumed or burned as incense to foster vivid, insightful dreams. Dreams themselves were regarded as direct reflections of one's inner truth, shaped by karmic imprints, unfulfilled desires, and spiritual purity. A troubling dream was not merely a random occurrence. It was interpreted as a clear indication that the soul was out of balance. In certain instances, the interpretation of dreams necessitated consulting a rishi or an enlightened spiritual preceptor. In Vedic India, sleep was not an escape from reality. It was a return, a sacred reunion with the eternal self, enfolded in conscious breath, sacred mantra, and divine intention. In ancient China, particularly within the profound Daoist traditions, sleep was far more than simple rest. It was an energetic rebalancing, a crucial period when the body meticulously recalibrated its internal energies and the spirit embarked on journeys beyond the physical realm. To achieve truly restorative sleep was not merely about being physically tired. It was about attaining a state of profound cosmic harmony. According to Daoist philosophical tenets, the human physical form was permeated with qi, a vital life force circulating through intricate channels known as meridians. If this essential flow was disrupted, sleep would inevitably suffer. Consequently, nocturnal rituals were meticulously centered on preserving and meticulously regulating the flow of qi. Prior to retiring, this involved adherence to specific dietary practices, engaging in specialized breathing exercises, adopting particular postures, and even precise timing of the sleep cycle itself. One did not merely go to bed. One consciously entered a sacred process of aligning the corporeal form with the energies of heaven and earth. Daoist monks painstakingly developed pre-sleep practices such as qigong, which involved slow, deliberate movements harmonized with deep, controlled breathing. These exercises were frequently followed by periods of meditation to calm the shun, or spirit, which was believed to reside within the heart. If the shun became agitated due to intense emotions, an imbalanced diet, or even an excessively noisy environment, the dreamer might experience disturbing nightmares, fragmented sleep, or even spiritual incursions. Sleeping environments were arranged with meticulous precision. Beds were typically constructed from wood or bamboo, materials thought to facilitate optimal energy flow. Headrests were firm and low, ensuring proper spinal alignment and unimpeded circulation of qi. Rooms were often sparsely adorned to prevent sensory overstimulation. Cleanliness was not merely a matter of preference. It was considered essential energetic hygiene. The specific sleeping position also held considerable importance. Lying on the right side was deemed optimal for promoting healthy digestion and enhancing dream clarity. The orientation of the feet and head was aligned with geomantic principles, concepts that would later evolve into the sophisticated system of feng shui. Dreams were interpreted as voyages of the Han, the ethereal soul, while the Po, the more physical soul, remained tethered to the body. The Hun traversed the intricate pathways of the spirit world during sleep. If an individual awoke feeling drained or terrified, It was believed their Hun had either become disoriented or subjected to spiritual attack. Protective talismans or charms crafted with cinnabar were occasionally placed beneath pillows to safeguard the delicate spirits. Taoists did not perceive dreams as mere psychological phenomena. They were potent diagnostic instruments, intricate spiritual maps detailing the flow of energy and the accumulation of karma. Sleep, when meticulously practiced, was considered a profound form of internal alchemy, a disciplined path towards cultivating immortality, one night at a time. Long before the magnificent city of Alexandria rose to prominence on Egypt's Mediterranean coastline, there existed Heracleion, known to its Egyptian inhabitants as Thonis. For centuries, this thriving metropolis served as Egypt's primary maritime gateway, a bustling nexus of commerce, religious devotion, and international diplomacy, where Greek merchants, Egyptian priests, and foreign envoys converged in a vibrant tapestry of cultures. However, by the era when late medieval historians compiled their chronicles, Heracleion had seemingly vanished from the annals of history, its precise location lost to memory, its name preserved only in fragmented texts and whispered legends. Many scholars dismissed it as mere folklore, a kind of Egyptian Atlantis. Yet, it was undeniably a tangible reality. Heracleion once sprawled across the Nile Delta, its intricate network of canals winding past colossal stone temples and bustling marketplaces. Towering statues of revered deities like Amun-Jereb and Horus cast imposing shadows over its vibrant harbors. Vessels from Greece, Phoenicia, and distant lands beyond docked there to render their tariffs and seek authorization to proceed further into the Egyptian interior. Its customs house was among the most crucial in the entire ancient world. It also functioned as a significant religious capital, a sacred site where pharaohs performed elaborate ceremonial rites to solidify their divine legitimacy before the commencement of their reigns. So, how could a city of such immense scale simply disappear? Sometime between the 2nd and 8th centuries CE, a series of relentless natural catastrophes afflicted the region. Earthquakes, gradually rising sea levels, and a sudden, devastating phenomenon known as liquefaction, where the saturated soil beneath the city essentially transformed into a gelatinous substance, caused vast sections of Heracleion to dramatically collapse into the Mediterranean Sea. Over the passage of time, layers of sand and silt meticulously entombed the sprawling ruins, and the relentless currents of the Nile's estuary systematically erased any remaining vestiges from view. Heracleion was literally expunged from the maps. For over a millennium, the city lay concealed beneath the waves, its existence hinted at only in scattered fragments by Herodotus and a handful of other Greek scholars. No one genuinely believed it could ever be rediscovered, not until the momentous year 2000, when French underwater archaeologist Frank Godiot made a breathtaking revelation off the coast of Abuka Bay. There, nestled within the silt-rich seabed, lay a city preserved with astonishing fidelity, like a meticulously sealed time capsule, patiently awaiting its reawakening beneath 30 feet of water. Colossal statues, ancient shipwrecks, gleaming gold coins, and intricately inscribed stelae began to emerge, collectively revealing that Heracleion had not been irrevocably lost, merely slumbering beneath the tranquil surface of the sea. At its pinnacle, Heracleion was considerably more than a mere coastal outpost. It was the pulsating core of Egypt's international trade, the indispensable initial stop for foreign merchants and diplomatic envoys before they were permitted to venture deeper into the Nile's interior. Strategically positioned near the canopic mouth of the Nile, the city functioned as both a critical customs checkpoint and a crucial cultural filter. Every commodity entering Egypt by sea was first obliged to pass through Heracleion. Ships laden with precious olive oil, fine wines, fragrant incense, gleaming silver, sturdy cedarwood, and luxurious textiles arrived from the Aegean and the Levantine coast. In return, Egypt offered its distinctive exports: papyrus scrolls, abundant grain, exquisite linen, finely crafted glassware, and precious gold. Heracleion served as the inaugural location where these exchanges were meticulously documented, rigorously taxed, and ceremonially blessed, frequently under the vigilant gaze of priestly officials and imposing divine sculptures. The Greeks who arrived there found themselves captivated and frequently awestruck by the sheer magnitude of what they witnessed. The temples were immense, meticulously carved from solid blocks of stone and flanked by statues towering to heights exceeding 5 meters. One temple, in particular, commanded attention: a colossal sanctuary dedicated to Amun-Jereb, a powerful amalgamation of the Egyptian deity Amun and a revered local god. Pharaohs would journey to this sacred site to receive the divine sanction for their rule, participating in elaborate ritual coronations that unequivocally reinforced their legitimacy in the eyes of both celestial beings and mortal subjects. However, Heracleion was not solely defined by its religious significance and extensive trade. It was also a truly cosmopolitan urban center where Egyptians, Greeks, Phoenicians, Libyans, and other diverse peoples coexisted, labored, and interacted. Artifacts painstakingly recovered from the seabed include inscriptions rendered in both Greek and Egyptian scripts, an array of amulets, intricate jewelry, and even detailed tax records meticulously etched onto ancient tablets. These extraordinary discoveries collectively unveil a city that thrived not in isolated splendor, but through its dynamic interconnections, a city that flourished and breathed through its multifaceted engagements with the broader Mediterranean world. Frank Godio's groundbreaking underwater excavations have brought to light over 70 ancient shipwrecks, many of which were utilized for the crucial transportation of goods to and from Heracleion's bustling docks. Discovered anchors, diverse ceramics, and numerous coins unequivocally confirm that trade was both extensive in scope and rigorously regulated. The city's temples maintained meticulously detailed records of the tariffs levied on incoming cargo, a portion of gold allocated for the state coffers, and fragrant incense reserved for the sacred rituals of the gods. In essence, Heracleion stood as Egypt's vital maritime heart, a unique confluence where divine authority seamlessly met the exigencies of international commerce. It served as the vigilant guardian of the Nile, extending a welcoming hand to the world while meticulously preserving its profound secrets until the engulfing sea ultimately reclaimed them. One of the most astonishing revelations concerning Heracleion emerged not from the discovery of coins or ancient ships, but from the colossal temple complexes that still lie perfectly preserved beneath the sea. These were not minor shrines nestled in obscure corners. They were vast, monumental structures meticulously fashioned from enduring limestone and granite, dedicated to powerful deities who governed the very essence of the Nile and the expansive cosmos itself. The city's crowning architectural masterpiece was undoubtedly the Temple of Amun-Jereb, an immense religious complex that seamlessly integrated both significant political and profound spiritual functions. It was within these hallowed precincts that pharaohs sought and received their divine sanction, performing intricate rituals designed to unequivocally confirm the legitimacy of their rule. Heracleion was far more than a mere customs checkpoint. It was a revered site of ritual coronation where Egyptian rulers spiritually intertwined their authority with the immutable divine order, a foundational concept known as Marat. Yet, The true wonder lies in how much of this ancient grandeur still persists. When Frank Gaudio and his dedicated team first plunged into the silt-laden waters of Abuka Bay, they uncovered colossal statues, many still remarkably standing upright. Some of these figures soared to heights exceeding 5 meters, including a magnificent statue of the god Hapi, a potent symbol of abundance and the life-giving inundation of the Nile. Other significant discoveries included meticulously carved statues of queens and pharaohs, rendered with astonishing precision and lifelike detail. What proves even more striking is that some of these statues were found nearly intact, despite having been submerged beneath the waves for over a millennium. Then there were the stelae, truly gigantic stone slabs intricately inscribed with ancient hieroglyphs. One particularly invaluable find was the Decree of Nectanebo I, an official royal proclamation meticulously carved into durable granite that enumerated important religious statutes and the specific privileges accorded to the temples. Its survival intact beneath the water is, in itself, a miraculous feat, and it provided concrete, undeniable proof that Heracleion was not just a fleeting myth, but a major, state-supported religious epicenter. The temples within Heracleion served not only as centers of profound religious worship, they also functioned as significant repositories of immense wealth and ancient knowledge. Offerings poured in from across the entire Mediterranean world. Gleaming gold, exquisitely crafted alabaster jars, ceremonial knives, and ornate incense burners. Statues of Osiris, Isis, and Horus meticulously lined the sacred temple halls, and ceremonial boats were actively utilized in grand sacred processions, some of which were discovered submerged but astonishingly well preserved. What these remarkable temples undeniably reveal is clear. Heracleion was a pivotal spiritual capital, not merely a bustling trade port. The profound rituals enacted within its sacred confines profoundly shaped the destinies of kings, bestowed divine blessings upon the economy, and forged a vital bridge between the world of the living and the mysterious realm of the gods, all now eerily silent, yet beautifully preserved in durable stone beneath the tranquil waves. For over a millennium, Heracleion remained lost, deeply buried beneath layers of accumulated sediment, completely erased from navigational charts, and largely dismissed by many as a mere figment of ancient imagination. But in the momentous year 2000, the profound silence of the deep sea was finally shattered. French underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio, generously supported by the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, IASM, made an extraordinary discovery that would send shockwaves across the globe. The astonishingly preserved sunken remains of a city that had truly defied the relentless march of time. Gaudio had dedicated countless years to diligently poring over ancient texts and meticulously surveying the murky waters of Abuka Bay, situated just off the modern-day coast of Alexandria. The region itself had long been rumored to conceal profound secrets beneath its surface. Vital clues were subtly embedded within the fragmented writings of Herodotus, Strabo, and various Egyptian records, all vaguely hinting at a once magnificent city that had been tragically swallowed by the Mediterranean Sea. However, until Gaudio's ambitious expedition, no tangible physical evidence had ever been successfully unearthed to corroborate these ancient whispers. Employing cutting-edge sonar and magnetometry technology, his team systematically scanned the seabed, meticulously identifying anomalous structures hidden beneath meters of accumulated silt. What ultimately emerged from these painstaking efforts was not merely a scattered collection of isolated relics. It was the indisputable revelation of a fully submerged urban center. Entire ancient streets, intricate canals, towering temples, majestic statues, and numerous shipwrecks lay remarkably preserved within the oxygen-depleted depths, shielded from the corrosive effects of erosion by thick layers of protective mud and riverine sediment. The initial artifacts successfully recovered were truly colossal statues, including two imposing 5-meter figures depicting a Ptolemaic king and queen, believed to represent the powerful ruling couple who had once governed Heracleion. Soon after, a massive stele, intricately inscribed in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Greek script, was brought to the surface, definitively confirming the city's identity. These bilingual inscriptions proved to be a veritable treasure trove for historians, serving as tangible, irrefutable proof that Thonis and Heracleion were indeed one and the same city, merely known by distinct names to its Egyptian and Greek inhabitants. Over the subsequent few years, Godio's dedicated team unearthed over 70 ancient shipwrecks, thousands of ancient coins, various weights, a plethora of religious artifacts, and numerous ceremonial vessels. What rendered this discovery truly extraordinary was not just the sheer volume of artifacts recovered, but their remarkable state of preservation. Unlike terrestrial ruins, these submerged artifacts remained pristine, untouched by the ravages of looters or the corrosive effects of weather, effectively frozen in time beneath the protective layers of silt. Frank Godio's momentous rediscovery of Heracleion transcended a mere archaeological achievement. It was a profound resurrection. A city once relegated to the realm of legend was now painstakingly re-emerging piece by painstaking piece, offering an astonishing and unprecedented glimpse into a vibrant ancient world once thought irrevocably lost. And perhaps most exciting of all, only a minuscule fraction of this submerged city has yet been excavated. Heracleion continues its silent vigil, patiently awaiting the next dive. Heracleon's rise to prominence was nothing short of spectacular, but its subsequent decline was a gradual, hushed, and ultimately devastating process. Unlike urban centers violently obliterated by widespread conflagrations or devastating wars, Heracleion slowly vanished beneath the encroaching sea in a prolonged, almost phantom-like descent. There was no singular cataclysmic day. Instead, the city was tragically lost through a protracted series of natural calamities that subtly unfolded over many centuries. Events too subtle and slow to capture widespread attention, yet profoundly powerful enough to completely erase an entire civilization from the historical landscape. The primary causative factor was persistent tectonic activity. The Nile Delta is geographically situated within a seismically active zone, and Heracleon's foundational structures proved particularly susceptible to these geological forces. Minor but recurrent earthquakes likely weakened the soft, waterlogged ground upon which the city was constructed, built on layers of unstable silt and clay rather than robust bedrock. However, it was not merely the tremors alone that sealed Heracleon's fate. It was a profound geological phenomenon universally known as liquefaction. Liquefaction transpires when ground material becomes thoroughly saturated with water and consequently loses its inherent capacity to adequately support overlying weight. Imagine a significant layer of wet sand abruptly transforming into a treacherous quicksand. This is precisely what occurred beneath the foundations of Heracleion. As seismic activity repeatedly shook the delta, and steadily rising sea levels pushed saline ocean water further inland, the very earth beneath the city literally transformed into a liquid-like state, causing entire substantial sections of the urban area to begin a slow, inexorable descent. Buildings of all kinds, magnificent temples, and even numerous ships were gradually pulled downwards into the viscous mud. Over the vast expanse of time, the city progressively fragmented. Its once bustling canals overflowed their banks. Its vital quays collapsed into disuse, and its grand temples began to tilt precariously before ultimately disappearing beneath the surface. The once vibrant and bustling port gradually rendered itself unusable, thereby compelling maritime trade to incrementally shift westward towards the burgeoning city of Alexandria, which subsequently rose to unprecedented prominence. By the concluding years of the 2nd century BCE, Heracleon's once paramount importance was undeniably waning. By the 8th century CE, it had almost entirely disappeared beneath the tranquil waters of the Mediterranean. What is truly chilling is the profound helplessness in preventing this slow demise, for it was an unstoppable force of nature. Nature progressed with agonizing slowness, yet with unyielding persistence. The inhabitants of Heracleon did not flee in widespread panic. Instead, they tenaciously adapted, painstakingly rebuilt, and fervently prayed. And then, one day, it was simply gone. Boats continued to sail unknowingly over its submerged ruins. Fishermen cast their nets precisely where towering stone deities once proudly stood, the very memory of the city slowly fading until even its ancient name became a mere legend. Today, Heracleon's profound submersion serves as a stark and powerful testament. Even the most magnificent and sprawling urban centers can be utterly undone not by the destructive hand of adversaries, but by the quiet, unrelenting power of the natural world. Heracleon may have vanished beneath the vast expanse of the sea, yet the countless artifacts meticulously recovered from its submerged ruins paint an extraordinarily vivid and detailed portrait of what daily life might have genuinely resembled in this once thriving and vibrant Egyptian port. Far from being an exclusively ceremonial or political nexus, Heracleon was a dynamic, bustling metropolis teeming with lively markets, sacred temples, welcoming courtyards, and active shipyards. A place where people fervently worshipped, actively traded, passionately debated, and profoundly dreamed. The city's blueprint, partly uncovered through submerged surveys, reveals a system of waterways meandering amidst stone edifices and docks. Vessels transported goods and individuals along these aquatic arteries, akin to how carriages would function in other urban hubs. Heracleon was often dubbed the Egyptian Venice, though it predated Venice by more than a millennium. Its architectural style was a synthesis of classic Egyptian forms, showcasing monumental gateways, obelisks, and temple compounds, with Hellenistic elements introduced by Greek colonists. The populace was a diverse assortment of Egyptians, Greeks, Phoenicians, Libyans, and other seafaring merchants. Excavated artifacts encompass Greek amphorae, Egyptian scarabs, and gold coinage imprinted with the visages of various rulers. This intermingling of cultures fostered a polyglot environment where multiple deities were revered, and numerous customs coexisted, frequently within the same dwelling. Spirituality was a cornerstone of daily existence. Morning tributes to divinities such as Amun, Isis, and Osiris were as customary as the first meal. Temples served not merely as ceremonial venues. They operated as economic centers, employing craftspeople, scribes, and clergy. They safeguarded wealth, administered justice, and even documented levies. A stone tablet unearthed from the location delineates intricate temple protocols, including the taxation of imported commodities, illustrating the indissoluble link between sacred life and commerce. Nourishment derived from both land and sea. Fish and shellfish were abundant due to the brackish currents of the Nile Delta, while internal agricultural lands furnished grains, figs, and ale. Markets adjacent to the quays would have been vibrant, bustling locales, fragrant with exotic spices, rich with textiles, and brimming with narratives from distant shores. And naturally, there was diversion. Sculptures and etchings allude to the presence of melodies, choreography, and festivities, particularly those venerating Osiris, which encompassed ritualistic boat processions and theatrical presentations. Heracleion was more than merely practical. It was animated. Ultimately, Heracleion was not just a harbor or a hallowed ground. It was a habitation. Its populace led commonplace existences beneath the gaze of immense gods, unaware that their realm would one day transform into myth, submerged in water. As Heracleon's prosperity diminished, a new metropolis emerged a short distance along the coast. Alexandria, established by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE. In many respects, Alexandria didn't just succeed Heracleion. It overshadowed it, becoming the jewel of the Mediterranean and the fresh core of Egypt's maritime and intellectual life. However, the connection between the two cities wasn't solely competitive. It was part of a larger metamorphosis in Egypt's political and cultural identity. During Heracleon's pinnacle, Egypt was still governed by indigenous dynasties, and the city's significance originated from traditional Egyptian spirituality and its strategic position near the Nile Delta's entrance. Heracleion was the point where foreign vessels were inspected, duties were imposed, and sacred ceremonies validated sovereignty. But when the Ptolemies, the Greek monarchs who succeeded Alexander, assumed power, they dramatically reoriented their emphasis towards Greek customs, urban planning, and governance. Alexandria, with its magnificent library, colossal lighthouse, and sprawling harbors, was engineered to impress and centralize authority. The Ptolemies rerouted trade through their new city, bypassing Heracleion in favor of a new Hellenistic capital. They introduced Greek architecture, philosophy, and administration, transforming Alexandria into a hub not just for trade, but for scholarship, artistry, and statecraft. For a period, the two cities coexisted. Religious observances persisted in Heracleion, and temples remained operational. Nevertheless, the equilibrium was shifting. Administrative authority transferred to Alexandria, as did the elite classes and global attention. Heracleion progressively became a mere phantom of its former self, still sacred, still venerated, but no longer essential. Then came the environmental catastrophes, soil liquefaction, rising sea levels, and Heracleon's eventual engulfment. As the city vanished beneath the waves, Alexandria rose unscathed, its coastal position more stable and better fortified. It inherited the legacy and the commerce that Heracleion once enjoyed. Today, the remnants of both cities narrate two facets of the same saga. One lies entombed beneath the sea, its stones shrouded in stillness. The other still pulsates with activity, though much of its ancient grandeur has diminished. Yet, without Heracleion, Alexandria would not exist. The elder city was the portal and the foundation upon which Egypt's destiny was constructed. When Heracleion slipped beneath the waves, it carried with it not just temples and effigies, but the everyday belongings and hallowed artifacts that characterized life in a grand city. Thanks to the oxygen-depleted, silt-rich depths of Abuka Bay, many of these items have been remarkably preserved, enabling contemporary archaeologists to reconstruct not only the city's visage but also the lives, vacations, devotions, and seafaring customs of its populace. Among the most astonishing discoveries are colossal sculptures, some exceeding 5 meters in elevation. These include portrayals of Ptolemaic sovereigns, Egyptian divinities like Isis and Hapi, and even monumental sphinxes. Though toppled by time, many were found where they fell, surrounded by temple fragments, as if the instant of collapse had been frozen in mud. Their countenances, postures, and inscriptions are still discernible, testifying to the artistic prowess of the city's craftspeople. But it's not only the monumental that endured. Divers have unearthed thousands of lesser artifacts: gold currency, lead weights, ceremonial implements, adornments, and pottery shards. One particularly captivating find was a collection of bronze ritualistic vessels, likely employed in temple rites, bearing intricate etchings and religious symbolism. Other discoveries include oil lamps, writing implements, and personal ornaments, the sorts of items someone might have carried in a satchel or kept on a domestic altar. Heracleion was also a harbor, and its maritime heritage is incontrovertible. Over 70 sunken vessels have been identified, many preserved with their cargo still aboard. Wooden hulls, anchors, and nautical instruments have aided researchers in comprehending how ancient Egyptians and their foreign visitors conducted trade. Some ships even appear to have capsized while moored, suggesting they sank during the same seismic events that sealed the city's doom. Perhaps most intriguing are the stele and bilingual inscriptions composed in both ancient Egyptian and Greek. These texts serve as legal documents, religious mandates, and temple inventories, offering direct insights from the past. One stele affirmed the city's dual identity as both Thonis and Heracleion, resolving a historical conundrum that had baffled scholars for generations. Essentially, the ocean became Heracleon's unforeseen gallery, a place of ruin, yes, but also of conservation. The artifacts recovered from the depths are not mere remnants. They are vibrant echoes from a forgotten realm, inscribed in stone, bronze, and stillness. Heracleion may be submerged, but its chronicle is far from buried. In fact, the city's rediscovery has sparked a renewed comprehension of ancient Egypt's connection with the sea, with foreign cultures, and with the divine. What was once dismissed as a fable, a name whispered by Herodotus, half believed by academics, is now a powerful reminder that history still conceals enigmas awaiting their emergence from the deep. In many respects, Heracleion challenges the conventional perception of Egypt as an arid civilization confined to the Nile. This was a seafaring metropolis, cosmopolitan and receptive to the world. Its culture was neither static nor insular. It embraced external influences while retaining a profound Egyptian essence. The very existence of bilingual inscriptions and Greco-Egyptian religious syncretism illustrates a society that was adaptable, fluid, and intricate. For archaeologists and historians, Heracleion is a treasure trove, not merely of physical objects but of contextual information. It assists in filling gaps in our understanding of Egypt's late dynastic and early Hellenistic eras. It reveals what a thriving port city resembled, how temples functioned as both sacred and bureaucratic hubs, and how natural disaster could gradually dismantle an empire's entrance. But the city's legacy isn't solely academic. It's profoundly human. The sculptures, the coins, the wrecked ships, they narrate the accounts of actual individuals. Merchants tallying cargo, priests murmuring incantations in temple courtyards, sailors docking in foreign harbors beneath the gaze of stone deities, mothers supplicating Isis for their children's well-being. All of that vitality, preserved underwater, silent for a millennium, now speaks once more. The unearthing of Heraclean has also reshaped the trajectory of archaeology itself. It offers evidence that submerged urban centers are not mere fantasies. With ascending sea levels and fluctuating climates, modern scientists are now re-evaluating what might lie beneath other coastlines. Carthage, ancient Alexandria, even portions of India and Southeast Asia. Heraclean has become a prototype for uncovering the past in the most unforeseen locales. Today, its riches are displayed in museums, its saga recounted in documentaries and literature. But the city still slumbers beneath the waves, largely unexplored, vast, and awaiting. Heraclean is no longer lost, but it remains an enigma, a spectral city betwixt worlds, murmuring across time from a submerged epoch of divinities, commerce, and vanished empires. Long before contemporary dentistry and fluoride-infused pastes, ancient humans already grasped a painful reality. Odontalgia is excruciating. And they didn't merely endure it, they actively sought remedies. Indeed, some of the earliest indications of dental care trace back nearly 9,000 years, demonstrating that early humans were far more medically inventive than we often assume. In the Meghar region of modern-day Pakistan, archaeologists unearthed human remains from approximately 7,000 BCE. What they discovered astonished the scientific community. Several crania with teeth that had been perforated using flint implements. These were not accidental marks or signs of injury. They were precise, intentional perforations meticulously bored into molars. The teeth belonged to adult individuals, indicating they survived the drilling procedure. And if that sounds agonizing, it likely was. There's no evidence of anesthesia, just resolve, keen stones, and a willingness to withstand torment for the sake of alleviation. These drills were probably propelled by bowstrings, employing a technique akin to fire starting, a reciprocating rotational motion that permitted the flint bit to abrade the enamel. It signifies the earliest known form of dentistry, predating Egyptian civilization by millennia. Why did they undertake such procedures? Hypotheses suggest it was to eliminate decayed matter, relieve pressure from abscesses, or possibly even for ceremonial objectives. In some instances, the teeth exhibited traces of bitumen or resin, which might have been utilized to seal the cavity afterward, a very rudimentary form of filling. This was not an isolated occurrence. In other prehistoric cultures, teeth were filed, extracted, and even dyed. Among certain African and Indonesian groups, dental modification was prevalent, not always for medical reasons, but as a form of social identification or spiritual guardianship. Still, the fact remains. Humans comprehended the significance of their teeth and were not hesitant to implement do-it-yourself solutions when decay emerged. Even in these early periods, dental ailments were more than just vexatious. They could be lethal. An untreated abscess could lead to infection, pyrexia, and even demise, which clarifies why, in a world devoid of antibiotics, excavating the rock, however crude the method, may have preserved lives. So, while they lacked porcelain crowns and novocaine, prehistoric people were not ignorant. They confronted dental discomfort with stone tools, raw fortitude, and astonishing accuracy, establishing the groundwork for all that succeeded. When it pertains to ancient medicine, Egypt frequently commands attention. and odontology was no exception. The Egyptians not only acknowledged dental issues, they established an entire medical discipline centered around them. In fact, the world's inaugural known dentist was an Egyptian named Hezari, who existed around 2600 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Dosa. His sepulchre bears the appellation Chief of Dentists and Physicians, indicating that dental care was already a revered profession in the Old Kingdom. But if you're envisioning a serene clinic with copper instruments and smiling patients, reconsider. Egyptian odontology was an intense amalgamation of practical techniques and mystical invocations. The renowned Ebers Papyrus, a 3,500-year-old medical manuscript, includes remedies for odontalgia, infections, and gingival ailments. Some treatments involved masticated herbs and mellifluous honey, both possessing antimicrobial properties. Others, however, entailed positioning a deceased rodent on the aching tooth and reciting incantations to banish malevolent spirits, hardly American Dental Association approved. Egyptians also grasped the principle of oral hygiene. They utilized twig toothbrushes, masticated on fragrant sticks to refresh breath, and even formulated rudimentary dentifrice from pulverized eggshells, bovine hooves, pumice, and myrrh. It was gritty, abrasive, and not particularly minty, but it was efficacious. In terms of actual procedures, evidence from excavated mummies unveils attempts at dental surgery. Some crania exhibit drilled molars akin to those discovered in prehistoric Pakistan, while others have abscesses that appear to have been drained. There are also indications of crude splints employed to stabilize loose teeth. Still, most Egyptians likely endured dental problems without significant intervention. Their dietary intake, rich in stone-ground bread, introduced ample sand and grit into their mouths, which prematurely abraded teeth and caused fractures. Interestingly, archaeologists have uncovered gold filaments and metal bands in a few crania, possibly the earliest instances of dental bridges or stabilization apparatus. Whether they were utilized in life or appended posthumously is debated, but they demonstrate one thing: Egyptians were contemplating innovatively about how to conserve the oral structure. In essence, ancient Egyptian odontology was part science, part superstition. They comprehended infection, practiced hygiene, and experimented with surgical implements, all while invoking deities like Sekhmet and Thoth. They may not have possessed anesthesia, but they harbored ambition, and that made all the difference. While the Egyptians were blending myrrh and bovine hooves into gritty dentifrice, the Etruscans of ancient Italy were pioneering something far more sophisticated: dental prosthetics. Long before the Romans held sway over the Mediterranean, these highly skilled artisans were crafting what could be considered the first dental bridges, elegant, practical solutions for missing teeth that would influence dentistry for centuries. Dating back to approximately 700 BCE, Etruscan burial grounds have unveiled crania fitted with gold bands and wire ligatures holding replacement teeth in position. These were not just functional repairs. They were symbols of prestige. In many instances, the replacement teeth were not artificial at all. They were authentic human or animal teeth, sometimes from oxen, fitted precisely alongside the living teeth using loops of fine gold. It was delicate, precise, and quite possibly painful, but it was effective. The Etruscans were renowned for their metallurgical proficiency, which extended to odontology. The gold bands utilized in their bridges were malleable enough to manipulate, yet robust enough to secure teeth firmly. These were not quick fixes for commoners. Rather, They were bespoke dental work for the elite, likely performed by skilled metalworkers or physicians associated with religious or aristocratic households. What's remarkable is the aesthetic caliber of their dental solutions. These bridges were not merely functional. They were fashioned to restore facial symmetry and preserve appearance. The Etruscans understood, long before contemporary cosmetic dentistry, that missing teeth altered not just mastication, but the entire facial contour. In a society where appearance and status were profoundly intertwined, this held significant weight. There's no direct evidence that they performed extractions or surgeries, but the presence of dental appliances suggests that oral well-being was actively managed, and not solely for medical reasons. Like their elaborate sepulchres and intricate jewelry, Etruscan dental work reveals a people deeply invested in presentation, heritage, and dignity, even in dissolution. Some of these dental bridges remained in place after interment, indicating they were worn in life and carried into the hereafter, a sign of how intimately dental care was linked to identity. In a world devoid of dentures or implants, the Etruscans' gold-bound bridges were a testament to innovation and refinement, a gleaming smile from a civilization ahead of its epoch. By the time the Roman Empire ascended to dominance, odontology had evolved into an amalgam of practical treatments, surgical experimentation, and questionable cosmetics. The Romans didn't simply inherit medical knowledge from the Etruscans and Greeks. They expanded it, systematized it, and imbued it with their own distinctly Roman panache. Consider it ancient dental care with a touch of militarized efficiency and an ascetic rinse. One of the most prominent Roman medical authors, Aulus Cornelius Celsus, detailed dental procedures in his medical compendium De Medicina. He described techniques for extracting teeth, treating odontalgia, and even cleansing the mouth with abrasive powders made from pulverized bones, oyster shells, and charcoal. Some concoctions included urine, which sounds repellent today, but actually furnished a natural source of ammonia, a potent cleansing agent. Yes, Romans used urine as a mouthwash, bottled and imported from provinces like Portugal and Gaul. It was prized for its teeth-whitening effect. Elite Romans seeking luminous smiles may have endured daily gargles of fermented ammonia, followed by a rinse of vinous liquid or vinegar to refresh their breath. Vanity, it seems, can surmount repulsion. Beyond that, Roman physicians employed forceps, scalpels, and dental elevators for extractions and oral surgeries. Metallic instruments have been discovered in excavation sites alongside surgical apparatus, demonstrating that dentistry, though painful, was not uncommon. Soldiers, in particular, received treatment for fractured or abscessed teeth, as oral health was deemed crucial for combat readiness. The affluent, conversely, had access to early prosthetics inspired by Etruscan designs. These encompassed bridges secured with gold wire and replacement teeth fashioned from ivory or bone. Like their forebears, Romans viewed teeth as emblems of status. A complete, pearly smile was associated with pulchritude, authority, and noble lineage, especially in public forums or baths. Even the philosopher Pliny the Elder contributed, advocating remedies like burnt mouse ashes for odontalgia or masticating mint for halitosis. His compositions, while idiosyncratic, reflect how profoundly oral well-being was integrated into everyday Roman existence. In the end, Roman odontology was as advanced as it was brutal. Painful, certainly, effective, occasionally. But for an empire fixated on dominion, hygiene, and appearance, Attending to one's teeth was a Roman imperative, regardless of the peculiar methodologies. While ancient Mediterranean civilizations were utilizing gold wire and pulverized bones to cleanse their teeth, the Maya of Mesoamerica were transforming odontology into a literal art form. For the Maya, dental modification wasn't just about health, it was about status, identity, and spiritual symbolism. They didn't just repair teeth, they embellished them, sculpted them, and embedded them with precious gemstones, all without contemporary anesthesia. Archaeological discoveries from sites in present-day Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras have unearthed crania with intricate dental work dating back over 1,000 years. Many Mayan elites had inlays of jade, turquoise, hematite, or obsidian fitted into their front teeth, not posthumously, but during their lives. The inlays were meticulously set into small, perfectly drilled perforations in the enamel using primitive rotary tools tipped with obsidian or other keen stones. It's believed they used water, pulverized quartz, or even plant resins as lubricants and adhesives to secure the gems. The precision of these modifications is astonishing. The drilled apertures are so symmetrical and clean that researchers believe the Maya possessed a profound comprehension of dental anatomy, even if they didn't articulate it in medical terminology. And remarkably, there's minimal evidence of nerve impairment or infection, suggesting these procedures were not only prevalent but successfully executed. But why did they undertake such practices? The answer lies in cultural significance. For the Maya, the oral cavity was a potent emblem, the conduit through which breath and speech emerged, both considered hallowed. Modifying teeth was a means to honor the deities, signify elite standing, or align oneself with cosmic energies. Jade, for instance, was associated with vitality, fecundity, and divine favor. A ruler with jade-inlaid teeth wasn't simply flaunting, they were embodying sacred authority. The Maya also practiced dental filing, reshaping canines and incisors into points, akin to vampiric fangs or symbolic glyphs. In some cases, the designs mimicked animal forms, likely invoking spiritual guardianship or metamorphosis. And while some dental work served ceremonial purposes, evidence suggests others were functional repairs, like filled cavities or drilled abscesses. So, the Maya weren't just performing ritualistic art. They were also addressing actual dental ailments centuries before European dentistry had caught up. For the Maya, odontology was a synthesis of medicine, enchantment, and aesthetics, a worldview ingrained in every gleaming smile. In ancient China, odontology wasn't a distinct science. It was deeply interwoven with the broader philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine, TCM. Rather than isolating the mouth as a separate entity, Chinese physicians believed that oral well-being reflected the health of the entire physique. An aching tooth wasn't merely a dental issue. It indicated an internal disequilibrium in the organs, particularly the stomach and kidneys. And while they didn't employ drills or bridges like other civilizations, the Chinese developed a sophisticated system of preventive and herbal dentistry that spanned centuries. As early as 3000 BCE, texts like the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, mentioned dental problems. Ancient practitioners mapped meridians, energy conduits that connected the teeth to specific organs. For example, pain in a lower molar might signify issues in the bladder or stomach. Rather than attacking the symptom, Chinese medicine aimed to restore equilibrium through diet, acupuncture, and herbal therapies. To maintain healthy teeth, daily oral hygiene was emphasized. People masticated fragrant twigs from aromatic trees like willow and miswak to cleanse their teeth, similar to toothbrushes. They also used saline rinses, pulverized herbs, and even powdered bone to remove accumulation. Dentifrice powders often included cloves, mint, rhubarb root, cinnamon, and ginseng, all intended to refresh breath, mitigate inflammation, and strengthen gums. Odontalgia was treated using acupuncture, specifically targeting points along the jaw, neck, and even hands to relieve discomfort and stimulate healing. This non-invasive approach was often paired with poultices, mixtures of ground herbs applied directly to the gingiva or cheek to draw out infection or reduce tumefaction. Interestingly, ancient Chinese texts also refer to tooth regeneration techniques using mineral pastes or spiritual rituals involving dragon bones, fossilized animal bones believed to carry potent qi, life energy. These bones were pulverized into powders and sometimes mixed with vinous liquid or herbs to create a type of early medicinal paste. There is limited evidence of surgical intervention or tooth extraction in early Chinese civilization, but that may reflect the cultural emphasis on conservation and equilibrium rather than invasive correction. In many ways, their focus on prevention, wholesome diets, consistent hygiene, and holistic body balance mirrors some of the finest practices of modern integrative dentistry. For the ancient Chinese, the pathway to a healthy mouth commenced not in the oral cavity, but in the harmony of the entire physique. In ancient India, oral well-being wasn't treated in isolation. It was considered a vital constituent of the body's overall equilibrium and energetic flow, deeply rooted in the ancient medical system known as Ayurveda. Dating back over 3,000 years, Ayurvedic texts like the Karaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita contain detailed observations on dental care, oral maladies, and remedies, some of which align surprisingly with contemporary understanding. The Ayurvedic approach to odontology emphasized prevention, purification, and daily ceremonies. One of the most enduring practices was dantadavana, or daily tooth cleansing using herbal masticating sticks. These sticks originated from specific arboreal species like neem, licorice, or babool, all of which possess antibacterial properties. Individuals would masticate on one end until it frayed, then utilize it to brush their teeth. This practice still persists in parts of rural India today. But oral care extended beyond that. Ayurveda also advocated oil pulling, known as kavala or gandusha, where oil, typically sesame or coconut, was swirled in the mouth for several minutes. This was not merely a hygienic ritual. It was believed to extract toxins from the body and fortify teeth, gums, and jaw. Modern research has indicated that oil pulling may indeed reduce deleterious bacteria and enhance gum vitality, lending scientific credence to ancient sagacity. The Sushruta Samhita, attributed to the surgeon Sushruta around 600 BCE, includes chapters specifically on tooth extraction, mandibular fractures, and oral ulcerations. Sushruta described surgical instruments for removing damaged teeth and draining abscesses, utilizing iron implements and herbal pastes to disinfect the area. He also recommended cauterization, incinerating the infected area with a heated tool for severe instances of decay or gum disease. Painful, yes, but methodical. The texts describe various dental afflictions, including dantahasha, dental sensitivity, dantachakra, tartar accumulation, and dantaveshta, gingival inflammation. Treatments were tailored according to a person's dosha, their bodily constitution, vata, pitta, or kapha, and could involve dietary adjustments, herbal rinses, and even contemplation to reduce stress-related clenching or jaw tension. For the ancient Indians, the mouth was a hallowed portal, a conduit through which speech, sustenance, and respiration all traversed. Maintaining its purity, health, and equilibrium was not merely a health decision, it was a spiritual obligation. In Ayurveda, odontology wasn't just a branch of medicine. It was a daily act of alignment between physique, intellect, and spirit. In the ancient Greek realm, medicine and odontology were profoundly molded by philosophy, empirical observation, and early anatomy. Unlike some civilizations that viewed malady as purely spiritual, the Greeks, particularly from the classical period onward, sought rational explanations for discomfort and decay, including dental issues. And while they didn't have dentists in the contemporary sense, their physicians practiced surprisingly advanced oral care for their epoch. Greek intellects like Hippocrates and Aristotle composed treatises on teeth in medical and anatomical terms. Hippocrates, often hailed as the progenitor of medicine, delineated the structure and emergence of teeth, causes of dental deterioration, and even methods of extraction. He believed that imbalances in the body's four humors, sanguine, phlegmatic, choleric, and melancholic, could lead to dental disease, especially gum infections and odontalgia. For the Greeks, diet played a pivotal role in oral well-being. Physicians cautioned that tender, adhesive, or excessively sweet foods could induce decay. Instead, crisp foods like apples, grains, and legumes were encouraged for abrading residue from teeth. There's also mention of masticating mastic gum, a resin from the mastic tree, to freshen breath and cleanse the mouth, a practice still prevalent in the Mediterranean today. When problems did materialize, Greek physicians employed treatments ranging from herbal remedies and poultices to rudimentary surgical procedures. Tooth extractions were performed using metallic forceps, often without anesthesia. The discomfort was intense, but sometimes alleviated with herbal sedatives like opium poppy, mandrake, or henbane. For abscesses, physicians utilized lancing techniques to release infection, often followed by saline or vinous rinses for disinfection. Aristotle took a particularly meticulous interest in teeth, even noting that men and women had differing numbers of molars, which proved incorrect, but demonstrated his endeavor to systematize human anatomy. The Greeks also documented rare dental conditions, such as teeth erupting later in life or even congenital anodontia. Odontology was not considered a separate field, but part of general medical instruction. Physicians treated everything from ulcerations to fractures, and teeth were simply another component of the body to be scrutinized and ameliorated. In essence, ancient Greek odontology was a synthesis of science, observation, and pain endurance. It wasn't glamorous, but it was grounded in the conviction that the body, even its dentition, could be comprehended, anticipated, and rectified through logic and erudition. Across millennia and scores of civilizations, ancient odontology progressed, not as a singular linear science, but as a global tapestry of innovation, ceremony, and fortitude. From flint drills in prehistoric Pakistan to gold bridges in Etruria, from jade-inlaid Mayan molars to Ayurvedic oil pulling, early societies approached dental care with a fusion of courage, ingenuity, and sheer necessity. Though their implements were primitive and pain management often non-existent, ancient cultures made surprisingly sophisticated advancements. They didn't possess germ theory or radiographs, but they comprehended that decaying teeth cause anguish, and they intervened as best they could, whether by excavating decay, utilizing herbs to dull the discomfort, or crafting prosthetics to preserve appearance. These early dentists, or healers, clergy, and artisans moonlighting as such, laid the groundwork for a medical art that would eventually become a contemporary profession. Even more striking is how multidisciplinary ancient odontology was. It wasn't just medical, it was spiritual, aesthetic, philosophical, and even political. In some cultures, a radiant, gemstone-adorned smile conveyed divine favor or social standing. In others, missing or misshapen teeth were linked to personal disequilibrium or even considered omens from the deities. Oral well-being, it turns out, was never solely about mastication. The implements left behind, obsidian blades, copper probes, gold ligatures, herbal scrolls, are fragments of a narrative that stretches across continents. They prove that ancient people, often regarded as rudimentary or superstitious, were inquisitive problem solvers. They observed, they experimented, and they transmitted what was effective. And many of their practices persist. We still floss, rinse, and brush. We utilize herbal components like clove, mint, and myrrh. Some even continue ancient customs like oil pulling or masticating neem sticks, not out of nostalgia, but because they are efficacious. Modern dentistry, with its implants, lasers, and three-dimensional imaging, may seem worlds apart from stone drills and mouse skull poultices, but the objective remains the same: alleviate discomfort, preserve dentition, and ameliorate lives.